¿Cómo están? Bienvenidos a otro episodio de Entrevistas aquí en nuestro canal. Hoy tengo un honor sumamente especial. Es una entrevista que he estado buscando durante meses. Es un tema del que hemos estado hablando durante años. Ustedes saben que es un tema que para mí en lo personal es sumamente importante. Hoy tengo el gusto de estar con la Embajadora de Palestina en México. Nadya, thank you so much for having us. A pleasure to meet you.
It's my pleasure. Thank you for having this interview.
Absolutely. So first of all, let me express to you all the sympathy to the Palestinian cause,
Thank you.
our indignation to the current ongoing brutality and genocide against the Palestinian people. And I was telling you just before we started the interview that I'm very sympathetic, not only to the cause, but because of my studies. I read a lot of Edward Said during my post degrees, and his book on Orientalism and on the Palestinian issue was very influential to my way of understanding geopolitics in the world. So having said that, this conversation to me is truly, truly important. And one of the main topics that Edward Said taught me about was the fact that we don't have enough exposure to the Palestinian side of the history, to the way you frame the issues, to the way you tell about the story, to the way you talk about your own culture and about your own phenomenology or your own experience of the events. So having said that, allow me to borrow you as much as I can and extend the sympathy of over my 8 million followers to your cause, and having everyone on your side and listening to your side of the story as well, so we can find a balance to this disproportionate event that we are living together today. Having said that, Ambassador, I wanted to start with the proper framing of the events that are going on. And I would like to hear from you, what are the proper words and statements, even legally and geopolitically, for us to understand what's going on in the genocide of the Palestinian people?
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. Edward Said for us is a hero. So I really appreciate that he's one of yours as well. I think it's quite simple, and it's exactly what you said. If we're talking about wording, the word that we need to use in Gaza is a genocide. And to be quite honest, I don't even think that word actually encompasses what is happening in Gaza. I mean, yes, we know that genocide means the deliberate physical destruction of a people through the means of killing, dispossession, and starvation, with the intent to erase them from existence. And this is something that we haven't only heard, by the way, from Israeli politicians and governmental officials in the past 2 years of the genocide. This is something that we've heard for many years. Palestinian people don't exist. There is no such thing as a Palestinian people. They're an invented people. But now we're seeing that those ideas, this ideology of theirs, is being put in practice in a way that is something I believe that no human can even comprehend what's happening. We have been now almost 2 years in this genocide. 60,000 Palestinians have been killed. And this is the number that we know, because hundreds of thousands of Palestinians are still missing under the rubble. They could be in Israel's torture centers. We do not know where they are. And there was a report of a Harvard report that just was released, I think, a couple of weeks ago, that estimated that the number might be up to 400,000. So we know that has happened. We've seen all of the horrible images on our phones because this is a live stream genocide. We know that there are now close to 20,000 children that have been killed. Every 45 minutes, a child in Gaza is killed in the most brutal, inhumane way. We're talking about a classroom of children every single day. We're talking about children who now are also are the largest cohort of amputees in the world. 39,000 orphans. We are talking about 10,000 women. We're talking about the destruction of an entire society, civilization, everything, schools, homes, roads, churches, mosques, everything that a human being needs to sustain life. And now we also have death by starvation. Yeah. Death by starvation, where we now have over 220 Palestinians who have been killed deliberately by starvation. That includes 100 children. Just this past day, 5 children have been killed by starvation. And the cruelty of this is, I think, for so many, is something that we cannot understand. I mean, we have thousands of trucks waiting to enter Gaza, 10 minutes away. Trucks that have baby formula. What kind of civilization does not allow baby formula to come in to Gaza? And nothing has gone through. And instead, they've created, this mercenary group, the Israelis with the Americans, of this group that they have the word humanitarian in the name, but there is nothing humanitarian in the name, where they've created these 4 distribution sites where starving Palestinians are meant to go and get whatever they can get in a span of 10 minutes, because it's like this, Simon says, don't go with the green light, 10 minutes to go, try to get a sack of flour, and then you're shot at. And people, instead coming back with a sack of flour for their starving family, they come back with the dead body. And we're seeing these images. And now, because of political pressure, they've decided to have these aid drops. Humiliating. These aid drops do not even touch the surface of what is needed in Gaza. They're the equivalent of like 1 or 2 trucks. There needs to be more than 600 trucks flooding into Gaza every single day. And they're actually killing Palestinians because they're falling on their heads. So the situation is something that is not something that you can process as a human being. And besides all of this, we have almost 200,000 Palestinians who are injured. And injured in ways that obviously they cannot survive from these injuries because they don't even have any sort of medicine that is allowed to come into Gaza. You have children who have been amputated without anesthesia. So the level of suffering is something so beyond anything that a human mind can comprehend. And these people, 2.3 million people who have been displaced over and over and over again, exhausted, trying to go from one place to another to find some sense of security for their families where there is none, continue to live in this nightmare with no end in sight.
Absolutely. Yeah, so thank you for those words of explanation. I think it's important for us to have the proper framing. As people will say, this is not a war, this is not a conflict, this is definitely a genocide, because the amount of brutality, the way the brutality is being implemented, the instrumentalization and the weaponization of starvation, the use of forbidden weapons, even under the Geneva Convention, have plenty of data that will justify the use. Plus the political system that is clearly not a democratic entity, is clearly a state of apartheid. The treatment of the Palestinian people, even within their own lands, is almost like a prison, like an open-air sky prison. Yes. They are, as you said, they are trapped to move from one place to the other and then bombed against the instruction, which is true brutality. And I wanted to frame something interesting here, because I think what people is suffering a lot from is this cognitive dissonance between what we thought the developed world could do and the amount of barbarism we're actually seeing. And it seems almost, as you said, impossible to imagine, impossible to grasp. How come we are seeing these images of brutality, mutilation, starvation, amputation without anesthesia? Like it's almost insane. It's almost unbelievable, to the point where some counter narrative is being carried across in order to discredit and make people in a way, imagine that this is not happening because it's too brutal to be truth. Right. So I think the media war, the discourse war, the narrative war is also a very important part. And that will lead me to my next question. I want you, if you can, take us a little bit back, because I think one of the main mistakes people make is to, this started on October, which is ridiculous.
Yes.
So if you could, and I know you probably have spoken about this many, many times, but for the people watching this interview, it's probably going to be the first time for somebody watching this video. So what is the true story that people need to understand in order to grasp the full complexity and the full brutality of this process of invasion and colonization?
Right. I think that's such an important question, because you have to put everything in context. This did not just happen out of a vacuum. Correct. The story did not start on October 7th. I mean, if we just look at Gaza itself, just in the past 18 years before this genocide started, Gaza has been completely blocked and sieged from air, from sea, from land. Like you said, they were imprisoned in the largest air prison in the world. Yeah. We are talking about, like I said, 2.3 million people. 1 million of them are children. Israel controls every single thing. what enters into Gaza, what doesn't. And even before this level of starvation, even during this 18 years of siege, they controlled the calorie intake of every Palestinian in Gaza. They know exactly everything that goes in to Gaza and what doesn't. And sometimes it's so silly and petty, almost like they don't allow like tahini to go in, but they'll allow garbanzo beans to go in, for example. Something so silly like that that shows that every single thing is so thought about in their control of the Palestinians. And in Gaza, during those 18 years of siege, they endured 5 wars against Gaza, where there was destruction, where there was death of many children and civilians. And the Palestinians are left to rebuild, because that's what we do. We construct. We don't destroy. So you had that situation in Gaza. But in the West Bank, you also have a situation of occupation and dispossession and apartheid. And the entire Palestinian state, which we made the huge historic compromise to accept 22% of historical Palestine, which is the West Bank, the Gaza Strip, and East Jerusalem as our capital. Mm-hmm. That entire integral entity has been under a brutal occupation. Yeah. And the Palestinians have been dispossessed from their lands. And apartheid has been the name of the game for Israel, where the Jewish people have more rights than the Palestinian Christian and Muslims.
Absolutely.
Where you have a situation in the West Bank now, and also the situation in the West Bank, while many are looking to Gaza.
Correct.
The situation is in flames. You have a situation where you have close to 1 million illegal Israeli settlers living on our land, where their whole point and purpose is to try and do anything they can to remove us from that land. They have been emboldened and protected by the Israeli forces. They are now going into every village, which they have before, but now on a highly emboldened scale, burning villages, killing people, burning all of our olive trees, trying to create a system where it feels impossible to live. And there is no accountability, right? I mean,
Correct.
Decades of Israel's impunity have led to its insanity. You've had 7 decades where they have been able to do as they wish without being held in any way accountable. So in the West Bank, you have a situation where you have hundreds of checkpoints. Palestinians cannot move freely. You have a situation, like I said, of the settlements. You have a situation of a wall that cuts into Palestinian cities and towns and villages that has separated the Palestinian people because it's easier to conquer when they're divided.
Absolutely.
And you have a situation in all of Palestine where the Palestinian people do not have any basic human rights. And I think that's really important for people to understand that this issue is a very simple one. It's about freedom. This is what the Palestinian people want. They do not, and nobody would accept to live their life under a brutal occupation, an apartheid system where there's 2 separate laws for 2 separate people. So this is important to frame it as this. It's as a framing of definitely not 2 equivalent sides. There is an occupier and an occupied. We don't have an army. We don't have
tanks.
We don't have these. We don't have nuclear weapons as Israel does, and we don't have the support of the superpower of the world.
Correct.
And we have year after year tried to do everything we can to try to bring an end to this occupation. And when we do that, for example, through peaceful means, it's called diplomatic terrorism. Our NGOs are terrorists. They're NGO terrorists. Because Israel wants to look at this as a framing of a terrorism framing. But the framing is of liberation. There's a settler colonial state trying to do anything it can to erase, whether it's our people, whether it's our cities, our towns, the names of these places that have been there for generations, and to gain as much Palestinian territory with the least Palestinian Palestinians on this land.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting the way you frame it, because Edward Said said that one of the main topics for us to understand the complexity of this issue, it's a matter of affirmation versus negation. He said it's the affirmation of one entity's rights to exist and the negation of the existence of a pre-existing entity. So in a way, this whole mess starts with this very twisted sentence, a land with no people for a people with no land, which is a very dark historical lie. So in that sense, can you bring us back to the founding of the Palestinian state, the culture of the Palestinian people? Because it brings me to crumbles when people say that like denying the existence of the Palestinian people and the rich history of the Palestinian people. Like you said, the importance of the culture. How can people further empathize with the history of Palestine? Because in a way, Walter Benjamin said, story is told by the victors.
Yes.
But today, that is even darker, I think, because the private property of the means of production give the media power with the support of capital. So in a way, you can be alive and not be able to tell your story. And that's a way to be almost zombified, in a way, like have a dead discourse because nobody's listening. So what can people understand, or what is important for people to understand about the history of Palestine in order for they to really see the difference between a pre-existing entity, the Palestinian state, and a colonizing effort, which is almost militarized, weaponized in a way for the United States and England to have a operational base in the region?
Yeah, I mean, I will first say that this lie of a land without people needs to be buried once and for all.
I agree.
It is absurd. It is obscene. Palestine is part of the cradle of civilization. It is where human history was written. It is where agriculture was born. It is where trade routes met, where prophets came from, where Jesus was born, where Palestinians, Christian, Muslim, and Jewish people lived in harmony. Yep. The oldest Christian communities are from Palestine. It is where ancient city like Jericho, the oldest inhabitable city, still remains today. Palestine is part of humanity. And to do what they're doing to Palestine is literally erasing part of the human origin. And Palestine was a bustling nation, place with diverse culture and history, like you said, with poets and intellectuals, with our own theaters, our own newspaper, living in beautiful, bustling cities like Jaffa and Haifa and Jerusalem. I think this for them, and it's also something that I think is me being Palestinian for them, should never be a negation of who they are. But that's exactly what it has been. And I could say that growing up being Palestinian, I spent most of my life in the US. And the idea of saying I'm Palestinian was something that was such a controversy. It was something that would be so upsetting to them to hear, because in their minds, you couldn't have existed because we were there.
Your affirmation is their denial.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this is something that has to be said, that this myth of Zionism, that they came to a land without people and they made that land bloom, is a lie. Yeah. We were there. We are the indigenous people of Palestine. We could tell you where our great-great-grandfathers and great-grandparents lived, where they're buried. The stories they tell us
the olive trees.
All the time, the olive trees. The olive trees, which makes you know who is native to that land. We would never burn an olive tree, which they do. This is something I want everybody to realize, is that Palestine, also, it's not just its tragedy and suffering and the sorrow that you see, that we are a people that have a rich culture and history. We are so proud of who we are and where we come from.
Yeah, it's a truly exemplary bravery, if you allow me the compliment. Now, I would like to talk to you a little bit about the critical and systematic failure of institutions to act. And also as, if you agree with me, a critique of liberalism. In a way, because we have this notion, as you mentioned, this is a problem of freedom. A freedom for who to do what over who. With what means. Because Noam Chomsky was the one who said that because the Palestinian people have no money and no power of violence, they also have no rights in a positive way. Because if we frame it natural rights versus positive rights, and we know philosophically and ontologically we are in a positive rights, even if we dream about human rights and natural and negative freedom, this is very metaphysical. But when you put it into paper and when you put it into action, we live into a positive rights ontology. Whoever is able to exert violence has rights. Who is not able to exert violence doesn't have rights. And I think, in a way, this also reveals the fundamental inefficacy of the liberal institutions. We see today, even if the CNGOI and the UN, like they have determined that this is a genocide. They even have apprehension orders against some key figures of the genocidal entity, and they don't do anything about it. They travel freely, they go to meetings, they are received and they're given honors and prestige, and like the cynicism of liberalism is beyond control. I think, in a way, like the mask has fallen off completely. It's what is your reading? I
mean, I think that's exactly what it is. Like, they have been exposed. But I will say, I think, maybe because I'm a little bit biased to the UN since I spent so much of my time there, is I think that, the UN, it's not these institutions where the problem lies. It's in the political will of these countries that are not able to take what has been adopted in these international multilateral forums and actually apply it in real terms. It's one thing to condemn, but where is the action? Correct. There's no enforcement mechanism. Correct. And we've also seen, obviously, the double standard. I mean, there is a double standard that is so clear now when we look at, for example, the issue of Russia and Ukraine. When we look at the International Criminal Court, for example, which is something that was spearheaded especially by the Europeans. And now you have a arrest warrant for the Prime Minister of Israel for war crimes. But yet he can fly over the space to go to the US. He can visit certain countries where they are by obligation bound to, they should arrest him. He is a war criminal according to the highest criminal court in the land. Correct. So that is the problem, is the selectivity. Is that what I think Palestine has shown, and maybe we've known this, but this has been such a glaring example, is that there is a selectivity of who these human rights are for, and who these protections are for, and who international law is for. Correct. And we as a people have constantly said that our defense and our army is international law, but it has failed us for sure. And I think that when you look at what's happening in Gaza, and I think in Palestine for decades of oppression and subjugation and occupation and apartheid, and how many resolutions we've had and how many different, ICJ advisory opinions we've had, that nothing has been able to actually remove and end this occupation of Israel, is that in Gaza, we've seen that it's really a litmus test. Palestine is a litmus test for humanity. Yeah. Every law, every moral value that we claim to believe in has completely failed in Gaza. And the question now for countries who want to uphold this global order that, we supposedly have, is that this is not just about Palestine anymore. This is really about who's next. Because we have seen the complete impunity for, on our screens, the first live stream genocide, 675 days, always wondering, I'm always thinking, this has to be what stops them. This has to be what's going to be, the world is going to interject and stop them. But yet it hasn't. So if there is no accountability, if there's no justice, then yes, this has been a completely failed exercise. And the thing that really drives me crazy is that, after World War II, we established this world order, these rules, these international law, international humanitarian law to protect civilians and to protect the vulnerable. But after the atrocities of World War II and the Holocaust, that was supposed to be the reason why these things never happened. And now they're being used as a justification why they're starving children, why they're killing children. And it is completely absurd. And I kind of want to go back to what you said about the narrative, because I think this is so telling and why actually we still are in this situation where the media has been complicit. Yep. We have, and Edward Said talked about this a lot, that, the Palestinians have never had the right to narrate their own stories. And when we do narrate, we have to be these perfect victims. We have to show and show our humanity and convince the others of our humanity before we even start talking about the oppression, the subjugation that we're going through. And I think that for the first time, we are seeing a shift in that. We are seeing now Palestinians being able to narrate our stories and hear it from them, from the ground. Not enough yet. And it needs to be. I mean, that is one thing that I will say to everybody is always listen to Palestinians. We said it was a genocide way before anybody else said it was a genocide. But now people say it's a genocide because only Israelis and, Jewish scholars are saying it's a genocide. We called it apartheid way before anybody called it apartheid. Listen to us. We are the ones who are living the experiences. Listen to the people on the ground who are day in and day out living under a brutal occupation, but somehow continuing because they have this will to live. They have this hope. They have this joy for life. And this is something that I really wish the media did. And I'm still trying to feel my way here in Mexico. But it's important. It's important to make sure that Palestinian voices are heard. So I'm really happy that you're giving me this opportunity to be able to speak.
Please. My pleasure. This was my intention from the very beginning. And I have to confess that normally I speak a lot in my interviews, but here I'm making a very deliberate effort to let you speak, because I agree 100%. And also, it's interesting that you mentioned this notion about the narrative. Another philosopher that I really admire, Jean Baudrillard, wrote a book in the 70s about the Gulf War. And he said that he felt in the Gulf War a drastic shift from the symbolic power, because he said people were surrendering to cameras, not to tanks. As if the symbolic value of violence is now placed in media, not in weapons.
It's in the truth.
So in a way, media has been completely weaponized. And I think even in the consciousness, in the unconscious that we share, we understand that media is a weapon that is fully instrumentalized in order to fulfill a role in geopolitics. And I think in the genocide of the Palestinian people is absolutely clear. Media has been a weapon that has been instrumentalized either to justify or further imply the justification of the genocide.
Spread the Israeli propaganda,
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, look now in Gaza. I mean, one, it has been the most deadliest conflict, of course, not for only children and civilians, but for journalists.
Yes.
And we just saw the deliberate targeting assassination
just last night
of journalist Anas al-Sharif and his whole crew, who were targeted because he was one of the only ones showing the world what was happening, showing the world the images of the starvation. And he was of course, not the only one targeted, but he's targeted because he's showing the world what Israel does not want to see. And him and the other more than 200 Palestinian journalists who have been killed in Gaza, that is the reason they were killed. And not only they're killed, their families are killed because of the work they do. They are putting so much at risk to show the world the truth because no foreign journalists can enter in Gaza.
Just to give data and background to what you're mentioning, the amount of journalists killed in World War I were 73. During the Vietnam War, in 20 years, were 63. During World War II, for 6 years, were 69 journalists. And only in the Gaza genocide for 1 year and 10 months has been 262 journalists.
Exactly.
Just so people can frame it in their minds. It's almost like it's crazy.
And it's not only journalists, too. It's humanitarian workers, it's medics, it's UN field workers. in every sort of category, you are seeing these numbers that are so shocking. And I think for the journalism, I think in the beginning, when October 7th happened, it was so nauseating, right? Because the frame of the questions was constantly just repeating Israeli propaganda, and they still are doing it. And the problem is if you go down their line of questions, you're never going to get a chance to actually talk about what's happening. So this is the problem. The one thing that I think that has shown people, obviously, that what is actually happening on the ground, besides these brave Palestinian journalists, is social media. And any person has this ability to show the world what is happening. And I think that has been so crucial for Palestinians because, like I said before, we were never really able to narrate our own experiences, where people see Palestinians for the first time as, I'm not saying everybody, but there has been such a dehumanization of the Palestinian people by Israel, where in past years, perhaps if 10 Palestinians were killed, maybe they would say, oh, but they're terrorists, it doesn't matter.
Correct.
People are seeing the images of who these Palestinians are, of fathers digging through the rubble to try to save their children. He knows he can't do it, but he stays with them, listening to their voices, talking to them, knowing that he'll never see them. You see children who are so starved they can't even cry, no tears. And you hear their moans, which you never even can imagine a human being making those sort of moans. You see all these stories of loss through the lenses of these people's phones that you would never see before. And you also see the resilience. You also see the community. You also see the insistence to live, no matter how hard it is, the hope that this will stop.
The attachment to the land.
The attachment to the land, the idea that, why don't they just leave? Palestinians have not left their land for 77 years. They're not going to leave now.
Under brutal occupation, and they're still there.
They still are there. They still are there, and their children, and hear the stories of the Nakba survivors. This is something, and I will say even for me and my children, they say, and we have a saying that they say that, they thought we would forget, but we are the seeds. And it's very true. I chose this line of work because of my time in Palestine, and I saw the injustice, and I said, this is my calling. I knew at the age of 14, this is what I wanted to do. And now, all of this effort they've spent in millions of dollars to, have this idea that there's no Palestine, these people are invented. The whole world has become Palestinian. Look at these amazing marches in every capital of the world have risen up with the flags. This for us is something that gives us so much strength.
I can imagine. I would like to focus on this notion as Palestine as a major symbol, or as a shifting symbol that is, in a way, the chain of signifiers behind what Palestine means has been updating itself. In the sense that, as you said, it could be a leading example to how we understand the application of international law and the role of institutions for other countries that are being occupied. And in this sense, I would like us to go back to where we are, to Mexico, to South America, to the global South as a whole. Today, we understand that liberal institutions are there to protect the asymmetries of power of the powerful versus the weak. Mm-hmm. And when we have to apply them to protect the weak, to protect the subalterns, we see they are either unwilling or unable to actually execute even what they sanction as law. So they use this double standard of saying, yes, we condemn, but we don't do anything about it.
Right.
Because in the way it goes against positive law and the fact of materiality as an ontology of what justifies the movement of geopolitics and history. And in that sense, what is your message to Mexicans, to Americans in the South of America, to how they could understand the example of what's happening in Palestine, to what could happen to them under similar situations, and how they, under this sense of empathy, of being victims as well, need to be able to collaborate, participate, and join the cause?
Yeah, well, I think this is why the Global South is so important. And I think this is why initiatives and groups like the Hague Group that was just had this very important meeting a couple of weeks ago in Bogota, and they took many measures on how they're going to try to stop the impunity of Israel and arms, and whether that's stopping ships that carry arms to Israel on ports and making sure that the universal jurisdiction is applied everywhere. I mean, that was super important.
Correct.
And you also see how South Africa, who went through apartheid for so many years, took the case of the genocide case to the ICJ for Palestine. That was not only something that was symbolic, but that was the South taking a leadership role. And you have the issue of BRICS now, who's also providing an alternative power structure to the one that we've had that, you know, represents 40% of the population of the world and 1/3 of the world's economy, that can change the power structure that we've known for so long, that's shielded this impunity for some. And I think this is what's important. I mean, I think the idea is that we together are stronger because, and international law has to be something that we strengthen because that is what protects us. But unity is important. Working together on different sort of initiatives to build gaps and to build bridges and lessen the gaps is important. We need to rely on each other in order to be protected. And this is why I think it's important, like these groups. I think it's important for, you know, all countries in the South to be a part of, for example, the Hague Group, and to adopt the declaration of the Hague Group, because this is exactly what the president of Colombia said when he was during that meeting. He said, if they can do this we're all watching, why would they not do it to another country?
Exactly. Yeah, the example of the impunity should be frightening to the rest of us.
Exactly.
Absolutely frightening.
Exactly.
I've said this repeatedly over my videos because I try to, even against the algorithm, because one thing that people have to understand, the amount of distribution you have with an anti-Palestine narrative versus a pro-Palestine narrative has a proportion that we have measured almost 100 to 500.
Wow.
So it's insane. Like the amount of distribution you will have on a video that is anti-Palestine versus a pro-Palestine video, it's brutal. Plus, you will get demonetized almost immediately for being pro-Palestine. And I can say this firsthand. I'm not telling stories here. I'm saying this
I can believe it.
Yeah. And even though, like, for us, it was very interesting because this is in a way reveals the logic of capital. You know, as a content creator, and so many of my friends and colleagues that are also content creators, they will say, I rather not speak about it. Because if I speak about it, I get demonetized. So I will just stay neutral. But again, in this point, neutrality is siding with the aggressor. You know, there's no possible neutrality in a genocide. You have to commit. But then again, the amount of negative feedback you will get is so systematic and so subtle that it feels almost like an impotence versus the system for people to be able to act. And under that scope, how can people act? What are the right ways for people to join the cause? What are the right institutions to trust? What are the right channels for people to join and listen? How can we listen to more Palestinian voices? How can we give more spaces to Palestinian voices? What is the outcome that we expect out of this moment?
Well, I think the first thing about this algorithm is that we have to break this algorithm. I think now more people than ever have been talking about Palestine, and I think they're having a hard time shadow banning every single voice.
They're trying, yeah?
They're trying. But I think that this is something they cannot succeed in. I mean, this is one of the reasons why they wanted to shut down TikTok, right?
Yeah,
the
exactly.
lobby in the US was not because of any
China.
other reason. No, it was because
yeah.
of this, because they were seeing too many watermelon emojis everywhere.
Yeah, they lost control of the narrative.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They lost control of the narrative. Exactly. I think it's really important to keep on posting about Palestine and to keep on talking. I think it's really important for people to have conversations with other people who don't know things about Palestine. I think it's important to learn about our culture and our history, to become more invested in what's been happening in Palestine over the past 77 years, to understand it from a perspective of a liberation struggle, perspective from anti-colonial struggle. I think it's important for bridges to be made also between Palestinians and Mexicans. I think when we talk about us being able to narrate, it's important for Mexican journalists to translate the stories of Palestinians in Spanish. I mean, if this was a 20-minute interview, I could have done it in Spanish, but an hour...
We'll do another one if you want.
An hour. It was better for me to do it in English. But I think it's important to, yes, join marches, join solidarity groups. BDS is a very powerful tool that is a nonviolent way to protest what is happening in Palestine. I mean, they are profiting off this genocide. I mean, Israel just in this year alone, I think, made more than 14, I want to say billion, but I don't know, but an extraordinary amount of money on just selling their weapons that they're using and experimenting on Palestinians in Gaza. It is a profit. And there are companies also that are making profit off this genocide. I mean, there was a very important report, which I also recommend for people to read these reports, from Francesca Albanese. She's brilliant,
Italian,
special rapporteur on the Palestine issue at the UN. I mean, this is a job she does for free. She is a hero. I mean, the amount of pressure and the amount of threats she gets for speaking the truth based on international law is unbelievable, but it's normal. Yeah. She had a report that came out talking about the economic profit.
The profiteering.
Of genocide. And there was a company here in Mexico that was named that is in the report, which I hope that they will now, having been exposed, will change their relations with Israel on that front. It's important for universities to be involved. It's important for universities to have events, to have talks about Palestine, to understand this in the framework of a justice issue, a human rights issue. It's not about being pro-Palestinian or anti-Israeli. It's about being pro-human rights, pro-international, pro-justice, pro-equality, pro-dignity, pro-human being.
Yeah.
And even if we didn't even have these laws, this issue is about human morality, human conscience.
Targeting baby formula is...
You don't need to have any laws to tell you that this is abhorrent.
Yeah.
I think that... I feel that the Mexican people, I've been really, really amazed to be here in this country. I really feel so happy because with all this pain, I really do feel that they give me so much strength wherever I go. And I meet these young people, or not even young, anybody really, who wants to give me a hug because they want to give my people a hug. And they want to know more, and they want to know how they can help. And I get so many different questions on Instagram on what else can we do? And the reality is, don't stop doing what you're doing. Don't let this become normal. Mm-hmm. This is not normal. And this is what Israel's trying to do, is to be able to do this so frequently that it's normal to bomb a hospital. It's normal to bomb a school. It's normal to bomb a shelter for Palestinians, thinking that this is a safe zone. It's normal to starve people. It's normal to rape people and torture them. And no, these things are not normal. These are crimes against humanity. So learn more about what's happening on the ground. Read different reports by different reputable organizations, even Israeli ones who are reporting about the same things, calling it a genocide. Read about our culture. Meet Palestinians. Try to reach out to meet Palestinians. Invite, Palestinians to speak at universities. Do cultural events in your universities. Boycott, march. Speak up, and also speak up to your representatives. Thank them for doing what they're doing, but also tell them that there needs to be done. There needs to be more to be done.
Action to be taken. Yeah. Ambassador, thank you so much. Such an inspiring voice. I really appreciate the time, the space, the flexibility of your agenda as well. If you want to do a second interview in Spanish, I would love to.
Let's do it.
We can do it when you feel more comfortable, you have more time. We can do it 20 minutes, shorter stories. But for me, it was really important to create this bond, create this bridge, because of course, I've been following the whole history for quite some time now. And as you saw, I've read some of the literature. I'm a fan of the poetry as well. I'm fan of the culture. It's so beautiful.
Thank you.
And I just want people to know that when we arrived here to the embassy, we were immediately hosted with food, with desserts. The mother of the ambassador hosted us, and it felt so warm.
Yes.
It felt so familiar. And your smile is so bright, and it brings so much hope to the narrative, where I feel in a way, at the same time, I struggle between the sense of being overwhelmed by the amount of propaganda, the amount of brutality, the amount of injustice and violence. But then seeing you, listening to you gives me hope. So I thank you for that.
No, and I thank you. And I think that we have something in common, Palestinians and Mexicans, in that sense, our hospitality and our generosity. And we can never lose hope, So there's some days I don't want to get out of bed because it's so overwhelming. But when you see your people every day getting up and insisting on living, they inspire you. And that's where my inspiration comes from.
Perfect. So Ambassador, again, my space is your space. Anytime you want to use it, my microphones are your microphones. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.